everyone from Brands Hatch. It's a 6th race weekend of the DTM season 2018. We're absolutely psyched to be back in the UK after 4 years of abstinence. And with me now is the DTM boss, Gerhard Berger. We're thrilled to be back here, not only racing in Brands Hatch, but also on the GP circuit. And I guess you have a lot to say about that. That is very exciting. And also, what do you think of the DTM, the direction it's going in at the moment?
Well, first, we are not just back in Brands Hatch, we are back in Britain, and Britain is the home of motorsport. So for me it was very important to bring DTM here again. I know it's going to be a difficult exercise to build up DTM again in Britain. It's going to take 2-3 years to get the fans all to the circuit and enjoy DTM. But I think we are doing a great sport. I think it's a sport what the British people like. And all this happening in Brands Hatch is just perfect. Here we have a special atmosphere. There's a lot of soul, racing soul here. The Grand Prix circuit is as I like it, because it's a challenge for the drivers. So everything perfect until now.
Absolutely, and the drivers seem to love it as well. So thank you so much, Gerhard Berger. And now back to the commentator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gerhard. Then making his feelings felt of how delighted he is that we've been able to bring the DTM back to Great Britain. And here we are at Brands Hatch, and as René has indicated, not just on the Indy circuit, as has been the past in previous years of DTM in Great Britain. We are on the full 3.9 kilometre GP circuit, which yesterday sent to the top of the podium one Mr. Daniel Juncadella, the Spanish Mercedes-Benz driver who took the race win from BMW's Augusto Farfus, who was P2. We've had qualifying already today, and the grid is set, and it's an all-British lineup on the front row of the grid, because it is Gary Paffett, leader in the Drivers' Championship, going from P1, and alongside him it is Paul di Resta. So a fantastic lineup here in Great Britain at Brands Hatch, with the start of race 1 just a few moments away. Back down to the pit lane with Verena now.
And now I'm here with a man who's in pole position, Gary Paffett. Fantastic qualifying for you, but I guess it's a different story to bring the baby home here, because now also with the weather changing, the conditions changing, how tough is it going to be to really take this baby home at your home race?
Yeah, very tough. I mean, qualifying already is difficult enough around here. You know, it's really old school circuit, and it pays for your mistakes like I made yesterday. But today, no mistakes. Yeah, the car's been excellent, but with the weather now, we expected rain. We knew it was coming, and it's here now. But how hard it's going to be and how hard it's going to get, we really don't know. So we just have to do our best and try and stay out of trouble. But it's going to be difficult, very difficult.
Well, best of luck for you, Gary. Thank you so much, and back to you.
Yes, what can he do? He's put himself in the best possible position, going from P1 on the grid for the British star, Gary Paffett, then, and alongside him is Paul di Resta. So an all-British front row, and of course an all-Mercedes front row, as we can see there, Timo Glock in the background of the picture, in fact in the middle of the picture, leaning against the tyre carriers in discussions with engineers there. So as we just heard Gary saying, it's been sort of spitting with rain, really, not even quite drizzle. So we are, or were, predicting that rain may play a part into this race. I would suggest at the moment that the rainfall that we've had is nothing like enough to affect the race so far. René Rast, he goes from P4 on the grid. Well, we will go down to
all right, and
René
now I'm
Rast.
here with the man who's the fastest Audi. That's René Rast, 4th place, which sounds promising at first, but you've got 3 Mercedes-Benz in front of you, so it's a wall of Mercedes. What are you going to do to go all the way to the front? And do you think the weather is going to be good or bad for that?
Hopefully a good strategy again, like Sanford. Yesterday, the strategy could have worked without the slow zone. Let's see. Obviously, like you say, the weather is a big factor. Right now it looks dry again. It drizzled just some minutes ago, but now it looks okay. So let's see. I think we can go aggressive again with strategy. Maybe not. Let's see.
Right. Well, you seem to be in good spirits, so best of luck for the race. Thank you so much, René. Back to you.
Thanks very much. So the strategy could work, maybe not, but he is in good spirits. René Rast then, we will see what he can do in terms of where he puts the car come the end of 55 minutes plus 1 lap. So we're looking at the Eduardo Mortara car to the very left of your picture there, although the cameraman focuses really rather on the grid girl that is there. And talking of the grid, let's take a look at how it lines up for race number 12. All British front row, all Mercedes front row. It's Gary Paffett, points leader from Paul di Resta, P2. Then we find Pascal Wehrlein and René Rast, who we just heard from, going from P3 and P4. To the next row of the grid, which is the third, it's Lucas Auer and a good quali from Robin Freins for Audi, going from P6 on the grid. Augusto Farfus on the P7 place, and Loic Duval is alongside him, going from P8. Then two-time DTM champion Marco Wittmann and Philipp Eng are on the fifth row of the grid, P9 and P10. Ahead of another British superstar, Jamie Green and Mike Rockenfeller, going on the sixth row of the grid for this second DTM race this weekend. Timo Glock and yesterday's race winner, Daniel Juncker-Deyer, on the seventh row of the grid, ahead of Nico Muller and Sweden's Joel Eriksson. And then bringing up the rear of the pack, it is Eduardo Mortara and Bruno Spengler. I did say yesterday, you can look at the result of race number one. It doesn't give you a form guide for race number two. And proof of the pudding is that man, Daniel Juncker-Deyer, who of course was the winner of the race yesterday. He's starting way down the order on the seventh row of the grid, going from P14. This is Lucas Auer. Finds himself going from P5 today. He was really disappointed yesterday because he had at one stage been leading the race and actually ended up the race in a podium place, but not taking the win, and he was very disappointed by that as we watched Loic Duval get the handshake just before jumping into the car. Delighted to say, alongside me is Brian Oliver. As we look at Eduardo Mortara's car, he's going from P17 on the grid, so one of the slower Mercedes, but we are talking about literally tenths between P1 and P18.
Yeah, we are, Dave. It's 0.7 of a second. We're covering the grid yesterday, and it's tight again today. Just every last tenth counts, doesn't it? And with these changing conditions, I think we're in for an exciting race this afternoon. It's
Indeed we are.
Starting to spit.
It is starting to spit. The weather is going to play a part. And let's go back down to the pit lane once again, because here is Verena.
And I'm here with Augusto Farfus, yesterday's second place, and now today starting in P7, which is going to be tough. However, with the weather perhaps changing, maybe that could be really good. So what are you expecting and hoping for the race?
I just expect hope for a good race. I mean, the weather, it will be crucial. Forecast, it is extremely difficult. Here in UK, you never know what's going to happen. So, of course, we didn't have the pace in qualifying to be up front, but I still P7, I think it is good enough to fight for a good result. Yesterday, we showed a very strong race pace. Who knows, today we try to repeat it and be up front again.
And also you've got your family here, so hopefully they're going to give you a good feeling too.
Yeah, I have to make them proud.
You did yesterday, so let's try to repeat that.
Yes, sure. Hopefully I can meet them again on Parc Fermé at the end of the race.
All right, best of luck, Augusto. Thank you so much, and back to you.
Always smiling. Augusto Farfus then, he was big smiles yesterday. As we look at Nico Muller, again disappointed with qualifying, going from P15, that 1:18.607. But as I said during the qualifying program, that with DTM, of course, it's all very well ticking 9 of the 10 boxes that you need to tick to be quick. You've got to tick every single one of them. And they're reinforced by Daniel Juncker-Deyer. Look, yesterday's race winner. It's P14 for Daniel Juncker-Deyer. Just 0.5 off the pole sitter, Gary Paffett, but 0.5 is the difference between P1 and P14. So close is it, Brian, during qualifying for setting the grid for race number 2.
Yeah, absolutely, really close, Dave. And Gary Paffett absolutely dialed in this morning, though. He was the only driver that managed to break the 1:18 barrier, posting a time 1:17.9. But Mr. Consistency actually has been René Rast. He finished yesterday in 4th. He qualified today in 4th. And he's actually had a fairly consistent weekend, a defending champion of DTM.
Yes, absolutely. And René is saying that, and we saw this really work at Zandvoort where the strategy came into play. And René, certainly, he's one of those drivers that is oh so focused with the team in terms of what they can do, what the potentials are and where to throw it. Of course, the big curveball in this race, as we look at Jamie Green going from P11, qualifying a sight better today than he did yesterday for the British star, Jamie Green. The big curveball in this race, of course, Brian, is going to be the weather. As you and I made our way up to the commentary studio, it was spitting just a little bit. We've just heard from Gary down there on the grid. Of course, it's dry at the moment, but there are some threatening clouds overhead, and it is possible that we could get an outbreak of rain during the course of the 55 minutes plus 1 lap.
Yeah, absolutely. And on this track, which DTM hasn't been to for so many years, it's going to be very unpredictable. We haven't had any wet weather running at all yet so far.
No, we haven't, but we are just moments away from the start of the race. UK. Brands Hatch, and we are here at the Long GP circuit. Quite close to Dartford, 9 DTM races since 2006. The winner back in 2013, Mike Rockenfeller. Some of the sights and sounds of the UK then as the crowds packed their way into this fantastic Kent-based circuit for DTM this weekend. The sun shone in parts, and then in other parts it clouded over and didn't, and those are the sort of overcast images that we can bring you now. And once again, the grid with the all Mercedes front row and all British front row featuring Gary Paffett and Paul di Resta, with Pascal Wehrlein completing the three-way sweep for Mercedes-Benz, going from P3 ahead of René Rast, the best of the Audi drivers, the best of the Beamers. It's Augusto Farfus who goes from P7 on the grid, as you can see. The rest of the grid in graphics, along with the portrait photographs of our drivers alongside, and we say bless you to Brian Oliver alongside us, who appears to be sneezing his way through his script at the moment. Here is Philipp, new into the DTM this year, a rookie driver, but of course a hugely successful driver. Been on the podium this year. At the moment, Philipp has not yet taken his maiden DTM win, but he's had a P3 place, and as I say, he's been on the podium. Two-time DTM champion Marco Wittmann, a 1:18.244 now. A 1:18.244 around the long circuit here at Brands Hatch is very, very good, but so close is the qualifying. It's only P9 for Marco Wittmann, and going a good bit quicker today. And P8 start for Loic Duval. Speaking to Loic yesterday he was saying was a troublesome day. He's hoping for better luck today. Always smiling, always chipper, always cheerful. Augusto Farfus then, and Augusto Farfus going from P7 on the grid, having taken that P2 place yesterday. Brian, we spoke to him just after the race. He was thrilled, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. He drove really well yesterday, and against very strong opposition. It was so tight yesterday, but they were spaced out towards the end, weren't they? There was, I can't remember how many seconds it was between the first and second, but there was a bit of space towards the end, wasn't there?
Yes, there was. Everyone had gapped out really nicely, and I think that's what Lucas Auer found so frustrating. He was trying to reel in Augusto Farfus right at the end of the race, and every time Lucas got a 10th perhaps on him, yeah, Augusto responded by going a 10th quicker, so it was really immensely frustrating for them, wasn't it? Because, you know, trying everything they could, but they are so evenly matched. René Rast, just in my opinion, is going to be one to watch this afternoon, going from P4, a 1:18.052.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about René Rast he's done at the last couple of races is pitting on lap 1 for his mandatory pit stop. Question is today, will he do that? Because with the weather a bit iffy, he might want to delay that pit stop because he doesn't want to have to come in twice to change the wet tyres. Going to be interesting to see what he does today, what his strategy is going to be.
Pascal Wehrlein, that's a really interesting facial shot of Pascal Wehrlein, and former Formula 1 star, of course, back into the DTM and remains the youngest ever DTM champion. He did a very good qualifying this morning and put the car on P3. It was mere hundredths that split the first three. There you can see Paul di Resta, British driver who's P2 in the Drivers' Championship. He is going from P2 on the grid. And, of course, pole position going the way of Great Britain as well, because it is Gary Paffett that is going from P1 on the grid. So there is Paul di Resta, and there is our pole sitter. Gary Paffett then leading the Drivers' Championship at the moment, and just nailed it absolutely perfectly right in the last stages of qualifying. And he was the only driver to go out of the 118s and put it into the 117.9s. Gary Paffett then doing enough for pole position as the engines are started, and the formation lap is not far from getting away, and the cars will be sent away. Here are the team standings then after 11 of 20 races. Mercedes in a very commanding position, as you can see, in P1 and P2 on 227 and 207 points, and they're in a commanding position here on the grid this afternoon as well. We await the cars being released then on their formation lap, and that's the man that's qualified the car on pole position. Gary Paffett, he was in conversation with Mark Blundell, former Formula 1 star, down there on the track just a few moments ago. 3.9 kilometres, we have 9 turns here at the Brands Hatch GP circuit. 6 of them are right-handers, 3 of them are left-handers. And Gary kicks out the back end of the car and gets away on the formation lap. It's now the excitement begins to build and generate, Brian.
Yeah, so this lap is very, very important. Let's see Gary really giving it some welly, getting off the line, getting some heat into those tyres, getting those brakes warmed up. Such a critical lap this installation lap is at the very beginning. They've got to have everything up to temperature, otherwise we're just going to all end up in a big heat at the end of Brabham Straight. And you look at that, it's such a big drop at the end of Brabham Straight into Paddock Hill Bend.
You're absolutely right. I drove the track on Friday and it is like dropping off a cliff. You're absolutely right. We saw yesterday, Daniel Juncadella was in pole position. He could not get off the line. Just evoked wheel spin. Paul di Resta will be quietly thinking, I wonder if the same could happen today, because Paul di Resta is on the outside of the inside line, obviously. Is that going to play into his hands? Gary knows how critical it is to get the start. It has to be said, Gary's starts are normally blistering and brilliant. He's really going to need to be on his mettle, isn't he, today?
He really is, but he's a wise man, is Gary Paffett, and you just know he's going to be giving it everything getting off that start line. As you say, though, Paul di Resta will be looking to get that jump, but it takes so much courage going into that corner. It's actually blind as you come off Brabham Straight and into Paddock Hill Bend. You actually can't see the corner, and you've got to have a lot of guts to keep your foot on the floor going around there.
I wondered what you were going to say, and I'm glad it was guts. But you're absolutely right. So we're going through the grid once again as we see the cars on their installation lap heading towards the grid. There's Mike Rockenfeller, there is Timo Glock, and there's Daniel Juncadella, yesterday's race winner, ahead of Nico Muller and Joel Eriksson and Eduardo Mortara and Bruno Spengler. Was that a lock-up from Bruno Spengler as he's trying to generate some heat? And there is perhaps a good example. That is the exit of the Paddock Hill Bend. And you really do fall down there. My goodness me, there's plenty of wind around as well, and if anything, that's probably keeping the rain away for the moment. But of course, as some clouds cover the area, is that going to bring the rain with it? Only time can tell, and 55 minutes plus one lap is what these DTM cars are about to do here at the Brands Hatch circuit. On board with Gary Paffett, who will be guided millimetrically perfect into his grid box. Stops the car, so does Paul di Resta. René Rast lines up right behind him. Into the garages of Audi, we can see the tension on the face of Dieter Gas ahead of Audi Motorsport as Pascal Wehrlein lines his car up into the grid box, into the garages of BMW. And there to the left-hand side of that, you can see some concerned faces. And Uli Fritz is certainly not smiling at the moment either. Stand by. Here come the lights. We await 5 lights on. When the lights go out, we will be away and racing. Let's do it. Here comes race 2 at Brands Hatch then for DTM. It was a good start from Gary Paffett, but it was a good start from Paul di Resta, who tries to outbrake and going around the outside into Paddock Hill Bend. They're on the way up to Druids now. Who is going to be first going through Druids? Gary Paffett has still got the inside line. Paul di Resta had just got his nose ahead though, and is he going to do it? Paul di Resta takes the lead, coming down towards Graham Hill Bend. It's Paul di Resta P1, Gary Paffett is P2, Pascal Wehrlein's P3, Lucas Hauer goes around. And there's damage on the front of the Augusto Farfus BMW. Also out is Loic Duval. So Loic Duval in the Audi then. And we saw the damage on Augusto Farfus's car. You can see the debris coming off the car now with the damage on the front of that BMW. Whilst all that was going on, everyone else escaping up the road now, and Augusto Farfus will have lost some downforce in that car. That will make him slow relative to the 4 that are ahead of him, which are Paul di Resta, Gary Paffett, Pascal Wehrlein and René Rast.
Yeah, that was a great start for Paul di Resta. You can see Gary had his...
Forgive me interrupting you, safety car has been called for.
Absolutely. So we're into safety car mode. Chance to take the heat off for a bit. Gary Paffett on the start line. He had his car angled towards Paul di Resta, but Paul just beat him off the line, round the outside. Such brave driving.
They were side by side going into Paddock Hill. I think perhaps Paul had a centimetre on him. But you've got to be brave on the outside line around Paddock Hill Bend, and Paul di Resta just stuck with it.
He nailed it, didn't he? He just kept his foot in there, didn't back off, and it paid off for him.
Here he is then, the lead driver, Paul di Resta, who, of course, will be frustrated that the safety car has come out right now, which means that everyone will back up behind him. Robin Freins, with damage to the back end of the car, brought about by Augusto Farfus. I wonder whether Lucas Hauer was just an innocent bystander in that, because we saw his car onto the grass as well. We'll doubtless get a replay of that. Here it comes. Well, this was Paffett then, chasing down Paul di Resta. So here we can see. Oh, so there was a touch on Lucas Hauer from Robin Freins, which meant that Augusto Farfus was the innocent bystander, in fairness. And from this angle, see just the touch between the two of them. Lucas Howe, did he get away with it scot-free out of the barriers? Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Of course, it's put him right down to the back of the pack nonetheless, but there we can see how it unfolded from those various replays, and the reason for the safety car was the Robin Fryns car was stuck up into the barriers. Here we can see from being on board with Philipp Eng. Yes, and the contact there between the two of them, and various bits of bodywork coming off the Augusto Farfus car. Jamie Green running right over some of it. We're praying that that hasn't caused problems. And there you can see the Augusto Farfus car then that is almost wingless, isn't it, with the bodywork damage on that car. So under investigation, the incident between Robin Fryns, Lucas Howe, and also car number 15, which is Augusto Farfus. So we're behind the safety car at the moment. Robin Fryns is continuing despite various bits of flailing bodywork. Of course, he's right at the back of the pack, and so too is Lucas Howe. Augusto Farfus managed to keep going, didn't he? But whether that will have an effect on the aero of the car, of course, because there are significant parts at the front that are missing, Brian.
Yeah, it's bound to have an effect, isn't it? There's quite a lot missing from the front of that car, and also we don't know what other damage was done with that impact. Loic Duval's he's had a weekend he's going to want to forget in a hurry. He ended yesterday's race in the tyre barrier, and he's done it again today, hasn't he? Just a very shocking weekend for him, and he'll want to forget all about it.
Well, you might have seen something that I didn't, to be honest with you, because it was Augusto Farfus, Lucas Howe, of course, and then it was also involved in that was Robin Fryns. Loic Duval is still running in P9, of course. Easy to get that wrong, that's for sure, but it was performance in terms of Lucas Howe and also Robin Fryns. Means they're now running in P17 and P18. Safety car is coming in at the end of this lap. Augusto Farfus is going to keep running with that bodywork. I wonder whether he will receive what is considered to be, or what is called the orange meatball flag, with damage to the front of your car, whether that will require them to show him the meatball flag, because there's quite a chunk of that car missing, Brian, and let alone the performance hamper that might be. The stewards and the race officials will be looking at that, and what they don't want to see is more debris coming off the front of that car.
No, absolutely. It doesn't look like there's anything falling off, but of course with part of the car missing, the aerodynamics all over the place, it looks safe from here, but the stewards might have a different view on it.
Yes, well, he managed to, he got a big save out of that, really. The two that didn't were, of course, Lucas Howe and Robin Fryns, who end up there. You can see Lucas Howe, and Robin Fryns is still playing catch-up, of course, because now when the cars go side by side for the Indy-style restart, Gary Paffett will be hoping that this is the opportunity for him to get a blast on Paul di Resta and try and do exactly what Paul did around the outside of Paddock Hill Bend. The cars line up side by side. This is one of the features we absolutely love about the DTM when it comes to the restarts. We go side by side for an Indy-style restart, then it's Paffett on the inside. It's Paffett on the outside of Paul di Resta. Paul di Resta already inching ahead. You can see some of the cars, they're locking up because they're trying to get ahead. Paul di Resta sorted that absolutely perfectly. Pascal Wehrlein through on the inside of Gary Paffett. No, not quite. René Rast trying to take advantage as well at the same time, and so too is Jamie Green, who's moving himself up the order. So what we love about the Indy-style restarts is it really does reset the race. Running out wide, René Rast, he will lose out on a place potentially there. Sure enough, because now the best of the Audis up to P4 is Jamie Green. 3 of the top 4 drivers now are British drivers. Paul di Resta, who I have to say absolutely nailed that restart. He really did. And there you can see he's beginning to stretch his legs over Gary Paffett, who is P2. Pascal Wehrlein is P3. Then it is Jamie Green that's P4. Robin Fryns did eventually catch up the crocodile of cars as they headed towards that Indy-style restart. And on board with Gary Paffett as Paul di Resta continues to put some tenths between himself and his British driving brand mate Gary Paffett, who we are on board with right now as he nails the curbs, runs over the rumble strips in his pursuit of the Paul di Resta car. Of course, none of the cars have stopped yet. the safety car really rather preventing anyone coming in for that early doors strategy with regards to pit stops. I wonder if we will see anyone that will come in towards the end of this lap as DRS gets enabled now. And what Gary Paffett, of course, needs to do is keep within a second of the Paul di Resta car so that he can use DRS, and this is where Paul di Resta is really going to have to defend, because of course with no cars in front of him at all, he won't be able to use his DRS to defend, Brian.
No, absolutely not. And Gary is just working really hard. He's got a 0.8 of a second at the moment. He's trying to keep di Resta in his sights. He really, as you say, he needs to keep within that 1 second. And Paul di Resta has none of that advantage. Obviously, we have to remember they have limited use of DRS as well, and so strategically he needs to deploy it at exactly the right time.
Yes, he does. So let's see. Gary Paffett then, at the moment, he was, last time, he was within 8 tenths. Fastest lap set by Paul di Resta as he tries to increase that gap to over a second. And if he does that, that means that Gary Paffett will be out of the DRS range. Black and white flag being shown to Jamie Green for forcing another car off the track. That, of course, would have been René Rast, I suspect, who we saw running wide on the run down to the Graham Hill bend. So the black and white flag is just a warning flag. So here is our race leader, Paul di Resta. When he crosses the timing line, it will be very interesting to see what the live gap is between himself and Gary Paffett. As in comes Pascal Wehrlein from P3. Also coming in is Marco Wittmann, also Loic Duval. They pit. And so too does Nico Müller, and I think that was Bruno Spengler in as well. So Pascal Wehrlein, who was running in P3, it's a very busy pit lane now, but he gets released. And Pascal Wehrlein on his way out of the pit lane. Loic Duval is in. It was a good stop for Pascal Wehrlein, a 6.9 second stop. Let's see what it will be for Loic Duval as we run the clock on that particular car. Identical time, 6.9. Nico Müller is also in, 6.7. They've taken 2 tenths out. Well done to the team working on Nico Müller's car. So, last time around it was 9 tenths between Paul di Resta and Gary Paffett, which means Gary Paffett does still have that DRS availability to him, and you can see him chasing the Paul di Resta car ahead of him. Unfortunately, we have a significant plastic sticker all over the see-through sticker all over the inside of the commentary booth here, but so we can't tell whether it is beginning to drizzle or not. I would suggest not. I think it's still dry. So Paffett then, even with the DRS assist, and as Brian mentioned, you only have limited DRS availability. You have it for 12 laps of the race. You can choose when to use it in the race, but it gives you 3 opportunities to use it in the race. And whether you choose to use 1 or 3 during the course of that lap, you lose them all. On board with Timo Glock, who's running in P9 at the moment, chasing down Eduardo Mortara, and in comes René Rast then. Of course, René Rast was put down a further position. Following the running off into the gravel. So the team go to work on the René Rast car. And we keep the clock ticking as well. And 6.8 second stop for the current DTM champion in car number 33 as he makes his way back out into the pit lane. And out of the pit lane onto the track once again. And also in was Timo Glock. So whether Gary can't quite see whether the DRS flap is being opened on the Gary Paffett car or not. He is not closing enough on Paul di Resta. He's taken the margin, Brian, down from 9 tenths to 8 tenths, but he's still not making any meaningful time. He's quicker. It was a 1:19.9 from Gary last time around. It was a 1:20.1 for Paul di Resta. So he is marginally quicker, but not by a big enough margin, I'm tempted to say.
No, absolutely. And Gary doesn't want to use that DRS unnecessarily. He needs to really be closer to get any major advantage from that. So he's saving that DRS for when he's a bit closer to Paul, but he needs to reel him in.
This is Pascal Wehrlein then reeling in the car of René Rast, and just shows his face to the inside, but nothing doing as René Rast then in car number 33. Both René Rast and Pascal Wehrlein have just pitted, of course, and getting the tyres back up to temperature once again. And as you can see, even while they're getting the tyres up to temperature, they're lapping in through the speed trap at in excess of 200 kilometers per hour in these fantastic DTM cars. 43 minutes plus 1 lap of the race left as Augusto Farfus is in. They're going to leave the car running. The gaffer tape, no, they're trying to use the gaffer tape just to hold on to various bits of panel work. So this is going to be a long stop for Augusto Farfus. Philipp comes out ahead of René Rast and Pascal Wehrlein, but they'll easily get past him because, of course, he will be on cold tyres. And what it does, it plays into the hands just a little bit, perhaps, of Pascal Wehrlein is trying to find a completely different line to use to try and get past René Rast, but at the moment René Rast in the Audi is able to show the Mercedes-Benz driver a clean pair of heels. So in terms of what they've done, this has been, with regards to their pit stops, this has been advantageous for René Rast over Pascal Wehrlein, hasn't it? Because the Audi is now ahead of the Mercedes-Benz, Brian. Yeah, absolutely. That was made up in the pits, a really, really quick pit stop. And that's obviously key. It's a team sport, and it's the team that gave him that place, really. And here we have it. It's Gary Paffett into the pits, isn't it? It is. Here he is for his pit stop. And it's not particularly fast, 7.8. That's not going to help him at all. That's going to put him well down the order. Well, the incident between Robin Freins, Lucas Out, and Augusto Farfus is being reported to the stewards at the end of the race. So here comes Gary Paffett then returning out on track. He takes his pit stop. That means that we still have two British drivers, P1 and P2, but it's now Paul di Resta and Jamie Green who's elevated into that P2 place. There is Paul di Resta, who has something like 4.3 seconds over Jamie Green. You can see on the exit of that turn there was still some debris off the Augusto Farfus car that was still on the track there. It's off the racing line. He's lapping really well, a 120.090 last time around, whereas most other people are in the 120.5s or 0.6s. So Paul di Resta, of course, has got a clear track ahead of him. He goes from third to fourth gear now, heading up to the clearways. Just takes his foot off the accelerator and then back on once again. And Paul di Resta comes in. We were on the splitter cam just as Paul di Resta decides to pit. So this is the race leader down the pit lane now. This is fantastic. Right, the team need to go to work on the Paul di Resta car, and we can afford no botches here. They've got to get it absolutely right, haven't they? And lose as little time as possible in this pit stop. 7.6 seconds. It's not the quickest, but it's not the slowest either. And the gap advantage he had back to the others, probably sufficient for that to be good enough for Paul di Resta to get that pit stop done and dusted. Here is Gary Paffett then in car number 2. And where is Gary Paffett relative to Paul di Resta? Di Resta on his way out now. Here comes Gary Paffett. His tyres up to temperature. Paul di Resta's tyres not up to temperature. It is now or never for Gary Paffett if he's going to try and get past the Scot, Paul di Resta. But I think di Resta has got enough of a margin. I think he'll get enough temperature into those tyres to be able to defend that position, Brian. Yeah, absolutely. Paul, his tyres were cold when they came out of the pits, but it takes about a lap just to get him up to temperature. Obviously, tyre warmers are not allowed, and Gary, as you said, was going to try. He needs to use this lap to try and catch up with Paul, but I think Paul has done enough, and it looks like the gap is pretty similar to what it was before both of them pitted. I think you're right. I think that whatever Gary throws at it here, Paul is doing a great job in driving that car and aggressively trying to get the temperature into those tyres to give him the grip that he needs to stay ahead of Gary Paffett. I'm sure he's done enough now because, as you can see, they're on the way back down towards the clearways part of the track now, once they go under the bridge. So the final turn here as Paul di Resta heads towards the bridge now on the exit of the Stirling's Bend, and then onto clearways, and in comes Daniel Juncadella as well. I think Paul di Resta has probably done enough to see off the challenge from Gary Paffett, but what perhaps it has done as they cross the timing line now, the gap between di Resta and Paffett is now 7/10, so they are closer than they were by a 10th, Brian. Yes, absolutely. It's a real shame for Gary that he had that slow pit stop, because had it not been for that, with Paul di Resta having a pit stop that wasn't particularly quick either, he could easily have jumped him in that. Well, it's always possible as di Resta runs out a bit wide there and Gary gets ever closer. So it's the two British stars racing against each other here for P1 and P2. Gary Paffett and Paul di Resta. It's Paul di Resta that's leading Gary Paffett at the moment. But now, with Gary Paffett ever closer to Paul di Resta, of course, Gary will have the DRS available to him. Paul will not, because he's not within a second of a car ahead of him. So Gary continuing to track the number 3 car ahead of him. It's always difficult when it's a brand teammate ahead of you, but every driver wants to win the race. Of course they do. That's why they are racing drivers. Incidentally, it's another British driver that's leading the race at the moment, but that is free pit stop. And that's Jamie Green in the number 53 Audi. So It'll be interesting to see. It was 7/10 last time around between Paul di Resta and Gary Paffett as they make their way onto the Clearways Oval, and they're about to put another lap in the book. Keep your eyes on the timing screen, Brian, alongside me, if you will. The gap last time around between car number 4 and car number 3 and car number 2 was 7/10. What is it now?
It's 0.5 now, 5/10, and we saw this yesterday. Gary Paffett's car seemed to come on as the race went on, and he seemed to pick up pace. And just when you think Paul di Resta has a handle on this, Gary's coming back, and he is well within the DRS range now, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see him using that DRS to try and get past Paul di Resta.
Well, let's see. So Gary Paffett then chasing Paul di Resta as we speak. They're making their way onto the part of the track that leads you to Hawthorne Hill now and up towards the Hawthorne Bend. Let's go on board with René Rast, who's classified as in P9 at the moment, but that's pre a number of the cars making their mandatory pit stops. So we keep our eyes on Gary Paffett and Paul di Resta. They avoid the little debris on the exit of the turn that he's still there, as Gary Paffett tries to chase down the Paul di Resta car. For my money, it looks like Paul di Resta is trying to press even harder on the hurry-up pedal, and whether the gap between the two of them, which was 5/10, I think this time Paul di Resta will have managed that and increased it just a little bit, but that's only anecdotal from what I can see in front of me. As they're back onto the clearways now and heading down the Brabham Straight. Once again, Brian, may I ask you to keep your eyes focused on the timing screen, please, because it was 5/10 last time around.
And it's 6/10 this time. So Paul, he's controlling it, isn't he? The Battle of Britain is going on here, and he is starting to control it a little bit.
Jamie Green makes some adjustments to his brake bias, as you can see in car number 53. He's leading the race at the moment for Audi, Jamie Green then. And this in replay where he ran wide, just the back end of the car, kicking off into the dust on his way up to Druids through Paddock Hill Bend. And this we're on board with the splitter cam now. And this shows you just how quick and what a roller coaster parts of this circuit here at Brands Hatch are. We're on the GP part of the circuit here, and running down now towards the clearways where you join the Indy circuit once again. The long sweeping right-hander through clearways now and back on the throttle, absolutely trying to push it through the floor of the car as we head towards the timing line. On board with Jamie Green, who is leading the race, and there is Mike Rockenfeller, fellow Audi driver, who is P2 at the moment. But bear in mind, of course, these drivers are yet to stop.
Yes, and yesterday, Mike Rockenfeller, if you remember, he mugged Jamie Green big time, going 3 abreast, probably move of the season, in fact, going past Timo Glock and Jamie Green. Oh,
what's happened here? We've got a wheel that is not done up on the Eduardo Mortara car.
It's disastrous, absolutely disastrous, and it's seen him dropping down. I don't know how long that stop was, but that's lost him a load of places, hasn't it?
Very, very nearly, of course, an unsafe release because, of course, the wheel not being done up. But Edo just managed to stop the car. Let's see it here. So wheel off, wheel on. The gun is on, look. The gun is on, and the jackman has let the car go.
Yeah.
So that was the problem there.
The nut wasn't even done up, was it?
No. Thankfully, Edo had the good sense to stop the car extremely quickly, and they had enough length in the airline to be able to take the wheel gun to the car, you know, to try and reverse that down the pit lane, albeit only a couple of meters or so. Would have been a nightmare for Edo Mortara, as if it were not nightmare enough. He's down there in P14.
Yeah, that's ruined his afternoon, hasn't it? In fact, he's down there in P17, isn't he?
Yes, he is, but once the pit stops have all been taken, the order then, the top, I think it's the top 5 cars that have yet to stop. We've got Jamie Green, Mike Rockenfeller, Lucas Howard, Joel Eriksson and Robin Freins, who are yet to stop. We're on board with René Rast, who effectively is P3 because, of course, he put himself ahead of the Pascal Wehrlein car, as Paul di Resta and Gary Paffett cross the timing line here. The gap is 7/10 between them. The one to keep an eye on here is the fast-moving Audi car of René Rast, in my opinion. As we look at the last laps, it was a 120.6 for René Rast, a 120.6 for Gary Paffett, and a 120.5 for Paul di Resta. So they're all within a tenth of being on the same lap times, aren't they? Paul di Resta then makes his way now up towards the Hawthorne Bend, which is the right-hander, which is turn number 5 on this GP circuit. Up Hawthorne Hill now, turns into the right-hander. This, in my opinion, could be the danger man this afternoon with 33 minutes plus 1 lap still to run. René Rast, to my money, is beginning to reel in the 2 Mercedes-Benz cars, Brian.
Yes, and it's what we said earlier, isn't it? He is Mr. Consistency, the defending DTM champion. And he has just been consistent all weekend, and he's looking very, very quick, isn't he?
Here's Gary Paffett that we're on board with now, who continues to chase down. You can see the margins, 6 tenths, 7 tenths, virtually nothing in it between the two of them, but just enough for Paul di Resta to be able to maintain that lead at the moment as they cross the timing line now. It's 6 tenths, so Gary Paffett has taken a tenth out of Paul di Resta once again, but it's been seesawing a bit between 6 and 7 tenths, but now he looks visibly closer, doesn't he, as he gets a very, very good entry and exit into and out of Druids, running down towards the Graham Hill bend. He kisses the apex of that and takes a little bit of curve now in his pursuit of the Scottish driver ahead of him, Paul di Resta, who is currently P1. Well, I say he is P1. Of course, he's not leading the race at the moment, but that's because 5 drivers have yet to stop for their mandatory pit stops. When they do that, Paul di Resta will be elevated from P6 back into P1. However, Gary Paffett has got different ideas about that, Brian, as he's trying to chase him.
Yeah, he is, and he's just trying everything. They are so consistent. You think of how much experience there is between these two drivers, and that gap says it all. There hasn't been any variation of anything more than about 2 tenths for the entire race, really, has there?
No, you're absolutely right. Paul di Resta just got an absolutely fantastic start, and that was perhaps potentially mitigated by virtue of the fact that we were going to go into that Indy-style restart after the safety car period, but to be fair, Paul managed it absolutely perfectly. But Gary Paffett is visibly getting a little bit closer now. Let's take a look at the start. So the initial launch by Gary Paffett was good. He pointed his car towards Paul di Resta, but Paul just got away, didn't he? And I just think that being on the outside line there, you can see he managed to get his nose in front, didn't he? And he had to be really brave going around Paddock Hill Bend. And you had to be brave where we are now when you see it in replay as he came down through a section into Graham Hill Bend. Now, this was René Rast, who, of course, was being mugged just a little bit. And we go back to the live pictures now as Gary Paffett continues to chase that Paul di Resta car. The gap last time around is 7 tenths between the two of them, under the bridge, heading up towards the right-hander now. Taken very nearly flat, as you can see, but he buries his foot through the floor once again. This is a great onboard shot, left foot braking being deployed by the British star Gary Paffett. And here comes Jamie Green, who is the race leader, but he's only the race leader by virtue of the fact that he's not stopped for his mandatory pit stop yet. So those cars that have not stopped are Jamie Green, this car, Mike Rockenfeller, Lucas Auer, Joel Eriksson and Robin Frein. So 5 of the cars have not stopped yet. And the first of those that have is Paul di Resta, and we see him now. So he's heading up towards the severely damaged Augusto Farfus car, and for my money, the Augusto Farfus front end of the car is lifting off now with the air underneath it. As there you can see, the best efforts with the gaffer tape, probably not enough. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see the Brazilian having to retire that car before the end of the race. What a shame, because it'll be a weekend of both highs and lows for Augusto Farfus. So, of course, what would be really good news here for Gary Paffett would be if Paul di Resta struggled to get past Augusto Farfus, and that allowed Paffett to get ever closer to him. And let's go on board with Paul di Resta now as they make their way then up towards the Hawthorne Hill and Hawthorne Bend, but it's no problem getting past Augusto Farfus, and I suspect that Gary Paffett will be able to get by him as well in the same move. Sure enough, that is the case. Good gentlemanly driving from Augusto Farfus there, not hampering either one of them as René Rast continues his pursuit as well, but hasn't yet passed the effectively backmarking BMW car. In comes Mike Rockenfeller now, so Jamie Green remaining out for the moment, so too Lucas Auer, Joel Eriksson and Robin Freins. But Mike Rockenfeller comes in. Let's run the clock on the pit stop of Mike Rockenfeller then. We've been in the high 6s, haven't we? And actually that's at the bottom end of the high 6s, Brian, a 6.8 time for Mike Rockenfeller, not too shabby at all.
Yeah, absolutely not too shabby. That's very comparable with everybody else. So there's only 4 cars left now that need to do their mandatory pit stop. Be interesting to see how late Jamie Green leaves it, won't it?
Yes, it will. I just wonder whether Loic Duval getting past Mike Rockenfeller. Of course, Mike Rockenfeller returning following his mandatory pit stop on cold tyres, so Loic Duval easily able to get past Mike Rockenfeller. I just wonder whether Jamie is... Now, just look. Are there little spits of rain on the windscreen of Jamie Green's car? I wonder whether Jamie is thinking, you know, I'm gonna stay out here for as long as I can in case the weather comes to us here.
Yeah, and that would be the absolute dream ticket for him. I expect he's probably doing a rain dance inside his car, because that would just work nicely for him, wouldn't it?
Well, he certainly doesn't come back in on this lap and keeps out there. What have we got? 27.5 minutes plus 1 lap of the race remaining. In the meantime, Gary Paffett continuing to chase down Paul di Resta. And again, this time around, I think they look visibly closer. That is only anecdotal. I haven't seen the evidence of that on the timing screen yet, but as soon as I do, I'll be able to give you an update of what the margin is between di Resta and Paffett. But wouldn't surprise me if it was back down to 5/10 again from 7/10. Lucas Hour is in, and a torrid stop for Lucas Hour, nearly 11 seconds. Gone from bad to worse for him. It's 6/10 between di Resta and Paffett. There is René Rast, who's a further couple of seconds down on them. So for the moment, the fight is on between the two British stars, Paul di Resta and Gary Paffett, making their way down towards the Graham Hill bend now. They're both supremely experienced drivers. Both know exactly how to pedal these Mercedes-Benz cars. I just think, I don't know, looking through the windscreen of that car, Brian, it does look like there is perhaps the odd spit of rain beginning to come down now. But I might be wrong. It's very difficult for us to tell up high here in our commentary position with that cellophane on the inside of our window, which really rather distorts our view rather than hampers our view. But I don't know.
Yeah, the thing is that we're going to need quite a lot of rain for it to disrupt this race. The odd spits is not enough to make any kind of difference at all. I think you'd need quite a downpour to have any effect on it, as we see Gary Paffett putting 2 tyres onto the dirt. He's trying very, very hard, isn't he?
He's pushing it as hard as he possibly can. Both of these drivers supremely experienced in all weather conditions. As in comes Joel Eriksson now, which means it's only Jamie Green and Robin Freins that have not stopped. René Rast is quietly going about his job as well, isn't he? He remains a couple of seconds down, but there you can see 2.4, 2.4, 2.4 between Gary Paffett and René Rast. They're all lapping in the same, roughly the same time, but it was last time around a 1:21.0 for di Resta, a 1:21.2 for Paffett, and a 1:21.2 for René Rast. But those times significantly slower now than the 1:19s, which of course are the theoretical bests. And of course, Augusto Farfus, with the damage to his car, regrettably becomes a retirement. That's a real shame, Brian.
Yeah, that was only a matter of time for him. He was lapping 2 seconds a lap slower than everybody else. And in the end, you're just getting in the way, and it's not good for anybody. Just looking at that lead battle with Paul di Resta and Gary Paffett, Paffett seems to have the legs on di Resta on the Grand Prix part of the circuit. That looks like where he's closing in on him. And then as we get through into the DRS section on the Brabham Straight is where di Resta looks like he pulls out the gap. That's just looking at it visually. He seems to have a car that's set up well in the Grand Prix section.
Well, we will see what happens, because now Paffett has brought the gap down to 6/10 between the two of them. But for my money, I think Paul di Resta is not overstressing anything. I think he's just driving well within the capabilities. And that means that he is having to force, or he is forcing Gary Paffett to throw absolutely everything at it in his quest to try and get close enough to the Paul di Resta car. But it's all very well being closer, isn't it? You've got to try and find a way by as well. And of course, René Rast is loving it, because the more these two could fight, for René Rast, it would be great news if Paffett was right on the back of Paul di Resta, because they would slow as they fight together, and that would allow René Rast to get ever closer. He makes some adjustment to the brake bias then as he goes down Hawthorne Hill and up into the Hawthorne Bend. So René Rast is catching them now. Last time around, René Rast was in the 1:21s. In fact, all the drivers in the 1:21s, with the exception of those that pitted last, people like Mike Rockenfeller in the 1:20s now. But on board with our race leader, Paul di Resta. This would do his championship charge the world of good. The points that he would bank for this P1 finish were it to stay this way. But again, I know I keep saying it, but this time it's such sadness for Augusto Farfus as he walks down the pit lane. The gap between Di Resta and Gary Paffett now is identical. It's 6/10. It looks closer though on the exit of Druids. I think Gary just gets it right through there and seems to get a little bit closer to Paul Di Resta, who's then able to pull away in other sections of the circuit. Of course, there are some parts of the circuit that are better for the setup on each of the cars independently, aren't they? You know, but
yeah, but you look at it, Paul Di Resta, he's a wise old head on those shoulders, isn't he? And he looks like he's got this under control. You look at Gary Paffett, he's sometimes a bit ragged on some of the corners. You see the back end stepping out. None of that with Paul Di Resta. He's just totally dialed in. It looks like that car's on rails at the moment.
Gary, of course, is throwing everything at it in his pursuit and trying to get close enough to harry Paul Di Resta, but at the moment he's not able to get quite close enough. So as they run through Paddock Hill Bend in this superb replay, I think I tend to agree with you where Gary, I'm not so sure I would say necessarily ragged. I think he's just pushing it to its absolute, both the car and himself, to absolute limits, and maybe just a shade over at times, as you say, as he's trying to reel in that number 3 car ahead of him. 6/10 was the margin last time around. 7/10 now, as you can see. Paul Di Resta 0.791, so very nearly 8/10. You're right, you know, he's just managing it very, very well. Quietly going about the business, though, is René Rast, who I predicted earlier on is going to be one to keep an eye on in this particular position, because as we go on to the Audi Sport Team Rosberg pit wall, there is the number 33 car running in P3. Actually, it's running in P5, as you can see from the graphics on the left-hand side of your screen, but I remind you that neither Jamie Green or Robin Freins, the 2 Audi drivers, have yet been in for their mandatory pit stop. So 2.4, 2.4, 2.7, the gap between Paffett and René Rast, and these two at the moment, there is absolutely nothing between them. And that must be really debilitating for Gary Paffett, who is driving the car to 100% of his ability. The car is performing to 100% of its ability, but it's not enough to close the gap to Paul Di Resta. As Robin Freins makes his way down the pit lane now, and the team stand by to go to work on the number 4 car, and that means that the only one yet to pit is the car of Jamie Green.
Just looking at the side of the Gary Paffett car as he's going round, he's only got 4 uses of the DRS left, so he's obviously been using that DRS. You see the display with the number 4 on it, and he's going to run out of DRS. He's going to need to be quite tactful with that, doesn't he?
Well, we will see. You get 12 laps of DRS usage during the course of the race, and you get 3 uses of the DRS in the lap that you choose at that point. So there is Daniel Juncadella, and you'll see when the LED indicator in the rear quarter is flashing, that's when the DRS is being used. The LED indicator actually indicating the position in the race, and for Gary Paffett it should be showing P3 at the moment, because of course Jamie Green, I mean, it's a race of attrition for Jamie Green. He's not come in, has he? He's keeping out there, and when you look at Jamie Green's time, admittedly he's got you know, no problems in terms of cars ahead of him, but he's lapping in the 120.9s, whereas most others are in the 121s, aren't they? So Jamie Green has got the pace. He's not suffering from tyre degradation at all, and this is the brilliant splitter cam on the Paul Di Resta car as he runs up now towards the Druids turn. Turns in, just keeps a metre or 2 away from the inside curbs to give him the perfect line down now towards the Graham Hill bend. Hugs the outside of that, then bounces on the inside because you get a run on the outside of Graham Hill. Cooper straight now before the left-hander, which brings you out onto the GP circuit. Paffett with 11 laps of DRS usage.
Sorry, my mistake.
No problem.
It's a learning curve.
Always. heading up now towards the Hawthorne Bend, the right-hander. Then it is the Derek Milner straight now, and I'm loving this lap on board with Paul di Resta, the splitter cam, as he turns right and heads down towards Dingledell. Then it's going to be Sheen Curve, which is the right-hander. Let's stay with this splitter cam all the way through to the Clearways part of the circuit, through the Sheen Curve, through Stirling's Bend now, as we head down towards Clearways now. This is Paul di Resta, who we are on board with. It's the right-hander taken almost flat now, heading up towards the timing line, and it's been sort of 0.5, 0.6, 0.7 between Paul di Resta and Gary Paffett, and as they cross the timing line now, guess what? It's 0.6. Brian.
Consistency, it's still consistent, isn't it?
But the one to keep an eye on, I think, is René Rast, who's taken some, over the last couple of laps, has taken maybe 4 or 5 tenths out of the P1 and P2 places. I know it's not P1 and P2, actually it is, because Jamie Green, who is showing us P1, hasn't stopped for his mandatory stop yet. So now Paffett is well within DRS of Paul di Resta ahead of him, but Paul di Resta has not got DRS usage available, but is able seemingly to manage this perfectly. This is the fight that's going on for P13 and P12, which of course will become P12 and P11 once Jamie Green does come into stop. And this is Timo Glock, who will be in the final points-paying position once Jamie Green stops, because it will elevate Timo Glock from P11 up to P10. But look at Lucas Au, dives to the inside almost of Nico Muller. And this is P12 in the race. And Nico Muller, Lucas Au and Joel Eriksson all fighting over these positions here. The LED indicator telling us that Lucas Au is in P13. It's going to be P12. Out of the points at the moment, but he knows he needs to get up the road, and stopping him from getting up the road at the moment is the car of Nico Muller. Lucas Au, of course, involved in that opening lap, the skirmish with Robin Freins and Augusto Farfus, which has sadly seen the end of the race for Augusto Farfus. 16 minutes plus 1 lap remaining as Lucas Au now, is he going to have a go going into Paddock Hill Bend? Nico Muller is the Audi driver. Lucas Au with a brave move to the inside. Well, respect to Nico Muller, who gives him racing room, because Lucas Au, he didn't barge his way into the gap. The gap was just enough Mercedes wide, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Nico Muller, you know, he could have so easily made contact there with Lucas Au, but respect to them both, racing room was given. Look how tight this was.
Yeah, sensible driving. Nobody scores any points when you're stuck in the gravel trap, do you? And that's good, sensible driving.
Very much so. So Nico Muller, you know, he had to yield there, but fair play to Lucas Au, who spotted a gap. It wasn't perhaps quite Mercedes wide enough, but he soon made it wide enough, didn't he? But without any contact between the two of them. Now Nico Muller is under pressure from Joel Eriksson, the BMW rookie star in car number 47, that's right behind the Nico Muller Audi. So this fight continues, but it is over the P12, 13 and 14 places at the moment. Di Resta and Paffett cross the timing line once again, and the gap between the two of them is, please, Brian, 6 tenths. Sorry, 6 tenths. Answered it for you there. It's been 6 tenths for lap after lap after lap, hasn't it?
It really has, yeah.
On board now with René Rast, who is running in P3 or P4 until Jamie Green stops, who's got some 27 seconds ahead of Paul di Resta, but I know exactly what Jamie is doing here. I'm guessing that what you said earlier on, Brian, is doing a metaphorical rain dance in the car, isn't he? Because even with a 27-second margin, by the time he's come into the pit lane, it is relatively short pit lane here at Brands Hatch. Even if the team do the most phenomenal pit stop for him, he's still going to come out on cold tyres as Mike Rockenfeller is pursuing Philipp Eng at the moment. Rocky dives to the inside of Philipp Eng, and this is going to be Mike Rockenfeller putting himself up another position. Sure enough, he goes through, because we can see through Philipp Eng's windscreen is the back end of Mike Rockenfeller's car. So he has gone through on Philipp Eng to make it up to P7, which will become, of course, P6. So Green now 27.1 seconds ahead of Paul di Resta, but minus his pit stop. And di Resta to Paffett. remains 6/10 between the two of them. And next in the target sight of Daniel Juncadea is going to be the car of Philipp Eng that has just been passed by Mike Rockenfeller. Danny Juncadea taking his maiden DTM win here at Brands Hatch just yesterday. And following the two of those is Loic Duval and Timo Glock. So Di Resta, Paffett, Rast, the 1, 2, 3 at the moment. Now the Rast margin is down to 1.4. This was a replay of Mike Rockenfeller. Sold Philipp a dummy, didn't he? Going around the outside and then dived to the inside. And also trying to take advantage of that was Loic Duval, but Philipp Eng said, no, you don't. And whoosh, the door was closed firmly upon him.
Yeah, Mike Rockenfeller, as I mentioned earlier, he's been a bit of a star this weekend. He did a brilliant move yesterday, getting around Jamie Green and Timo Glock, didn't they? Went 3 abreast going into Hawthorns, and just proved you can go 3 abreast around Brands. Very impressive.
That was one of the classic shots of the race, wasn't it?
Really
Those
was,
cars.
yeah.
On board with Jamie Green then, who is leading this race. He's 27.3 seconds ahead of Paul Di Resta. Now, Jamie Green has not yet stopped for his mandatory pit stop. Still got to do that. He's doing a great pace out there in the 1:21.1s. The only person that is as quick or quicker is Pascal Wehrlein, I think. And that is probably the only one. Perhaps Robin Freins as well, right at the back of the pack at the moment. But there is the sort of race leader once Jamie Green's pit stop has been accounted for. But I said earlier on, Brian, this man who we're on board with now is going to be one to watch here, because he is quietly taking the tents out of Paul Di Resta and Gary Paffett as Paffett locks up there, and that plays into the hands of René Rast, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And right, here we go. Jamie Green comes in now. So Jamie Green is the very last of the drivers to make his mandatory pit stop down the pit lane, and the team stand by to go to work on that car. So the Audi Sport Rosberg team go to work on the Jamie Green car. Let's run the clock on that. We're looking at times of 6.97. Oh, it's not a quick one for Jamie Green. 8.6 seconds. That will not have helped at all, and I wonder where that's going to mean he's going to factor out. Is it going to be P4? Yes, it is. Or is it? Because here comes Pascal Wehrlein, who Jamie Green will be easy prey for him around Paddock Hill Bend. Jamie to the outside, Pascal to the inside. So that now becomes P5. He'll try and make it wide ahead of Marco Wittmann, won't he? But of course he's on cold tyres. Pascal Wehrlein with a very wide line through Druids there. So Jamie Green sticks his elbows out to try and defend against Marco Wittmann, but oh, and there you can see, look, and actually Wittmann is on the grass there as he's trying to get on the inside, and eventually Jamie does yield and Marco Wittmann will go through, but he didn't make it very easy for him, did he? And as I say, sticking his elbows out there. So Jamie Green, following his pit stop, makes an adjustment to the brake bias. And, well, he comes back out after his pit stop, and it will be P6 for Jamie Green.
Yeah, it's a fairly optimistic move from Jamie Green there, wasn't it? Marco Wittmann doing well to keep it, actually. Getting it onto the grass when we've had so much rain over the last few days, he could have ended up in all sorts of problems.
We're into the final 10 minutes of the race, plus 1 lap. The gap between Paul Di Resta and Gary Paffett is 8/10. Right, let's, as they cross the timing line now, it's 6/10 now between Di Resta and Paffett, and René Rast is just lurking 1.7 seconds behind the race leader. As you can see from the indication on the graphics. There is Jamie Green then, who's got some temperature into the tyres now. Of course, he's going to have the youngest tyres of anyone in the race, but what have we got? 9 minutes of the race remaining. And obviously the rain dance being done in the Jamie Green car hasn't worked out. But now, all of a sudden, the danger man that I said might play into this battle is going to do so. If everything stayed the way it is at the moment, Paffett would be at the top of the championship on 177, but his lead would have been decreased by Paul Di Resta, who would be on 148. Then it would be Marco Wittmann, P3. Then Lucas Au, Edo Mortara and Timo Glock down to P6 in the Drivers' Championship. That's if everything stays the way it is at the moment. This was the incident between Jamie Green and Marco Wittmann. So Wittmann then to the inside, and as you say, Brian, it was good car control, wasn't it, from Marco Wittmann, who got 2, if not 3 wheels onto the grass as he was squeezed just a little bit by Jamie Green. And here comes Gary Paffett now, continuing to chase down that Paul di Resta car. The gap has been 6/10 for lap after lap after lap after lap, but another 10th has been taken out of the Gary Paffett time by René Rast in the Audi, the current DTM champion. We've got 8 minutes plus 1 lap. Rast is going to have to get the hurry up to do this, if he's going to do it. At the moment, and I mean, those 3 are so far ahead of Pascal Wehrlein, aren't they, who is running in P4 at the moment. This is going to be the fight over the final stages of this race.
Yeah, absolutely. Pascal Wehrlein, who started off strongly, but his challenge seems to have petered away a little bit. But yes. Rast he's getting closer. 2/10 a lap. He's taking out to Gary Paffett, and he's going to give Gary Paffett a big problem because, of course, any challenge that he wants to make on Paul di Resta, he's going to risk letting René Rast in.
Here comes Jamie Green trying to wrestle that place back from Marco Wittmann that Marco Wittmann took from him. Marco having to take to the grass, the curbs, the dirt, anything to get past Jamie Green as he was squeezed a bit. But Jamie Green now, having got those tyres up to temperature, is taken the chase down to Marco Wittmann. This is the fight going on for P5 between the BMW and the Audi driver, and Mike Rockenfeller is lurking not far behind as well. So on board then, as we can see the Marco Wittmann car there make its way through the Clark curve and heading on to the Brabham Straight, being pursued by the all-orange car of number 53, Jamie Green, as they head into Paddock Hill Bend. Jamie not close enough to have go on the inside. He is pushing it. Jamie Green has got a drive-through penalty. Second infringement of forcing another car to leave the track. That means Jamie Green's P6 is all over because he has got to take a drive-through penalty. So
that's such a shame, isn't it?
It is a shame, but in fairness, it was his second infringement. And now, you see, what Marco Wittmann needs not to do is fight too hard with Jamie Green. It's almost worth him letting him go by, isn't it? Because Jamie has got that drive-through penalty. Now, you have to take that within 3 laps. We've got 6 minutes plus 1 lap. There is time for Jamie to take it, but of course, if there isn't time in the race, then the time gets added at the end of the race. But here is Paul di Resta, who continues to keep that 6/10 gap between himself and Gary Paffett. This is the gap that is reducing, and it's the gap between René Rast and Gary Paffett. So all of a sudden, Gary's focus is going to go away from attack and refocus on defence, because in the final 5.5 minutes plus 1 lap, as Wife looks on, Gary Paffett then is going to try and have to hold off this Audi car.
Yeah, it's another 2/10 that René Rast has taken out to Gary Paffett. Very consistently, he's just grinding that down. And he's going to give it another lap. He's going to be pretty close to DRS ranges. Jamie Green comes in to serve his drive-through penalty.
Yes, Jamie Green choosing to take that penalty. And this was the second infringement, you see, of running someone wide, and that's why he's got that drive-through penalty. And in fairness, Marco did very well to hold on to that, truthfully. So Jamie Green then, who had to yield to Marco Wittmann, but he didn't make it very easy for him. Robin Freins and Joel Eriksson having a fight as well now. This is for the P12 place. And is that a very slowing Loic Duval car? Oh, he's got a puncture. Oh. Do you know what? It goes from bad to worse for Loic Duval, doesn't it?
It does. I mistakenly thought he was caught up in the earlier incident, and he wasn't. I hope I haven't put the commentator's curse on him there.
No.
Now I can say he's had a weekend to forget, can't I?
He has. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Poor old Loic.
If he had no luck, it would be better than the bad luck he's had, wouldn't it? Robin Freins goes through on Joel Eriksson. That's for P12. So Robin Freins in the Audi then puts himself ahead of the rookie driver in the BMW, Joel Eriksson. And, right, this 3-way fight for the lead of the race. I think it's going to be a 2-way fight for P2, because I think Paul di Resta is going to be able to escape scot-free. Here's Timo Glock then. And, of course, Loic Duval with that deflating tyre. We can see, I'll tell you what, that's exploded. That isn't slowly deflated. That has just gone, hasn't it?
I wonder if he's just run over some debris. If you remember,
well, there was debris, yes,
on the track from that early incident, wasn't there?
Very fair point.
And he might have run over some. He might have had a slow puncture to start off with, and that could have just let it go like that later on in the race.
Right, stand by for a British lesson in how to make your Mercedes twice as wide as it actually is, because that's exactly the what Gary Paffett is going to have to deploy now to try and hold René Rast at bay.
Well, René Rast has taken 0.2 of a second out of Gary Paffett every lap for about the last 5 laps. Yeah. Consistent, absolutely consistent. Without a doubt, he's going to be within DRS range within the next lap. And then the fun's going to really start for Gary. And as you said, the hunter becomes the hunted.
You're absolutely right. Gary Paffett with a glance at the rearview mirror, then you can see that as they return to the Clearways Oval, then he's trying to keep that René Rast car sufficiently behind him. Paffett, of course, is going to have DRS as well that he can use to defend. And that mitigates the advantage that René Rast would have, of course, because Gary Paffett was well within a second of Paul di Resta.
Yes.
René Rast well within a second of Gary Paffett. So Paffett very cleverly, by not overusing DRS earlier on, he's held it back, and he's now going to have to use it in defense. So it's going to be raw pace between the two of them, Audi versus Mercedes-Benz, as Mike Rockenfeller and Marco Wittmann fighting over that P5 place, which at the moment Marco Wittmann heads the Mike Rockenfeller car. But tell you what, Rocky is looking pretty bold and ambitious here, isn't he, as he tries to chase down the BMW in the final closing stages of this race. All of a sudden, wherever we look, stuff is going on, including Loïc Duval, who still hasn't made it into the pit lane and is cruising around with debris, of course, being shed off the tyre, which exploded right across the start-finish line, to be fair. So, di Resta leading from Gary Paffett, René Rast. And this is the fight, as I said, that is going on for P5 in the race. At the moment, it's Marco Wittmann. But let's go back to this battle across the top 3. We have Paul di Resta leading from Gary Paffett. And here is René Rast then, who is chasing both of them in that P3 place. But I'll tell you what, I think despite the stoic efforts of René Rast, we're going to run out of time here, because we're down to 1.5 minutes plus 1 lap. And as I say, I think it was, and you pointed this out earlier on, how Gary was being quite frugal with his use of DRS early on, and that may well really save him in that P2 position, because he's able to use it to defend against René Rast now.
Yeah, the DRS adds a really good dynamic to the race, doesn't it? Because first and second are obviously, second and third are able to use the DRS, but unless he can find a back marker, Paul di Resta cannot. And look, here we have René Rast taking a look on the inside of Paffett.
There's no chance of him getting within a second of anybody. There's no one ahead of them. So here comes Rast then. It's now or never, really, as they go down Hawthorne Hill now. And René Rast, you can see all over the Mercedes-Benz of Gary Paffett. Now, Paffett knows he's leading the Drivers' Championship. He doesn't want to compromise too many points. He knows the win is not there because Paul di Resta has got the pace. But he wants to defend that P2 position, but he doesn't want to get into a position, Brian, as you indicated, where 2 drivers are off the track. That means that no points to be won for anyone. And Gary knows that every single point is very important now as they head towards the Drivers' Championship conclusion right in the middle of October at the Hockenheim circuit. Done himself proud, of course, by banking 3 points in qualifying earlier on today by putting the car into pole position. And here comes René Rast now as we start our last lap of the second DTM race here at Brands Hatch. What can René Rast throw at the Gary Paffett Mercedes-Benz car ahead of him to go from P3 to P2? Truthfully, I think he's done enough. I think Paffett will be able to defend this for the remainder of the lap, and René is going to have to settle for P3, but you don't know what's going through the mind of René Rast now as they turn into the Grand Prix section of the circuit now, and the long stretch. Hawthorne's now heading now for René Rast, who Gary Paffett has, of course, used DRS then, you see, and that just gave him that little boost. Did not allow René Rast to get close enough, and that means that Gary is able to complete this lap. Paul di Resta leads the race. Gary Paffett P2, René Rast P3. We're on the last lap of the second DTM race here as we return to the UK at Brands Hatch on the big GP circuit rather than the Indy circuit. Just a few hundred metres of tarmac to be done for Paul di Resta, the British driver who is going to take the win here at Brands Hatch as he heads towards the checkered flag. Paul di Resta wins from Gary Paffett P2, René Rast P3. Pascal Wehrlein some distance down, should take P4, but Paul di Resta has done it, and he did it right at the start of the race.
Yeah, it was that move into the first corner, round the outside. A lot of bravery, kept his toe on it, and to keep it going around Druids on the outside as well. Brilliant mature driving from Paul di Resta.
He's done a great job. Pascal Wehrlein takes P4, Marco Wittmann is P5, ahead of Mike Rockenfeller, despite Rocky trying to get past him. Then it was Philipp Eng, Lucas Hauer, Danny Juncadella, and Nico Muller rounding out the points-paying places, and congratulations all round in the Mercedes-Benz garage, P1 and P2. A good day's work at the office here at Brands Hatch for Mercedes-Benz, and I have to say, Paul di Resta, absolutely faultless in that race. Really never looked, for my money, threatened by Gary. I think Gary was just giving it everything he could, but they were so almost identical in pace that it was going to take something happening, wasn't it, for Paffett to have the ability to try and find a way past him.
Yeah, it was such a mature drive from Paul di Resta, and when you look at it, he never let that gap go below half a second, did he? He had control of it all along. He was off the pace yesterday, but whatever they've done overnight, he's really sorted it out, and clearly the quickest man today.
Yes, I just wonder, and often, you know, you hear us say, oh, if only another lap, another couple of laps, would it have all been different for René Rast? I don't actually think so. I think, you know, it's very sensible, mature driving by Paffett as well, by not overusing DRS in the early stages of the race. Thank goodness he will think that he had them there for the defence purposes against René Rast, who was clearly quicker, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one thing catching a car, it's another thing passing. Even with the aid of DRS, Paffett is mature enough to put his car where he needs to put it for a couple of laps to stop René Rast getting past.
Well, there we have it. The cars slowing down then as they head back to the Parc Fermé area. Paul di Resta has done it in car number 3. It's his second win of the season. He took the opening race, of course, at the Hungaroring circuit, and he's running out wide to make sure there's plenty of pickup. And this was the move right at the start of the race. Paffett, for my money, got a reasonable start, but Paul di Resta just got a marginally better one and had...
This is it. This is the brave bit, isn't it? Round the outside, down Paddock Hill Bend, and round the Druids hairpin. Brilliant.
To be fair, you know, both of them gave each other racing room around Druids as we saw them there, and here he is taking the checkered flag again. So a great job done by Paul di Resta. He looks pretty happy in the car, doesn't he? And the marshals all applauding as we applaud them, because without them we wouldn't go racing. They do a great job at racing circuits all around the world, and the engineers are getting it already. Their own personal podium in there in the garage, Brian.
It's a budget operation with water.
Into Parc Fermé they come, and the number 3 car of Paul di Resta, the race winner, then lights up the rear wheels and smokes it.
That's a nice bit of showmanship, isn't it?
Oh, we love that more and more. That's what we love about the DTM, is the whole show element. Very, very serious, competitive, professional motor racing, of course, but long may it be. Very showman-like as well. So the family, well, some of the family will stay awake for congratulations purposes. And they're the top 3 cars in the Parc Fermé now as the fences go across. And here is the race winner, Paul di Resta, jumping out of the car then. Did a very, very good job. Mature, sensible, well-driven race from Paul di Resta. And reinforces what we said right at the start of even qualifying earlier on today. You can look at the results of race 1. Does it give you a form guide for race 2? No, it jolly well doesn't. Congratulated there straight away by Gary Paffett, who gave it his all. He gave it his everything, didn't he, to try and reel him in, but it just wasn't to be today.
Yeah, with the exception of René Rast, Mr. Consistency, they were completely different results from yesterday today, weren't they?
Yeah, and that's just another thing that we love about the DTM, of course. You can't necessarily predict what is going to happen at any stage, so congratulations all round then. And the cars and the drivers in the Parc Fermé area. Gary did everything that he possibly could. But again, very sensible driving from Gary in terms of that DRS usage. So he had it to defend against that guy that we were seeing there, René Rast, who undoubtedly over the last, and it was quite a lot of laps, wasn't it? Over maybe 10, 12 laps, where you could see that René was just taking tenths out of Gary Paffett ahead of him. But never quite enough to get them. No. You know, they're so evenly matched on pace. And what delights me is the fact that Audi are back in the game here. Do you know what I mean? The disadvantages they've had earlier on in the season, they've done within the realms of what they're allowed to do with the car to try and get it back on terms.
Yeah, it's interesting with DRS because you often see it as an overtaking aid, but it's just as good as for defending that position, which is what Gary did so well today, using it to defend his second place.
So the photographs then for the top three as we bring you the official result. Paul di Resta takes the win from Gary Paffett and René Rast. Then it was Pascal Wehrlein, Marco Wittmann, Mike Rockenfeller, Philipp, Lucas Ahr, Daniel Juncker-Deyer and Nico Müller rounding out the top 10 in race 12 of 20 this season. P11 went the way of Timo Glock. Then it was Robin Freins, Joel Eriksson, Bruno Spengler, Jamie Green, and the cars we lost, Loic Duval, Edo Mortara, and Augusto Varfus. Paul di Resta, race winner at Brands Hatch.
And here he is, the winner of Brands Hatch. In fact, it's your third victory here in Brands Hatch. And you were in a world of your own, it seemed, in regards to pace. Did you feel any pressure from Gary Paffett at all?
There was always pressure, but I guess most of the job's done in qualifying. It's such a hard track to overtake on. And when these guys stop in lap one effectively, they push you into something that's a bit uncomfortable. But we had to manage it, and that was basically how it was dictated to ensure we kept track position on them and get to the end of that race. It's a key point. Losing points yesterday, it was the only time I didn't score. Unfortunately, we had a problem with the car, but resolved overnight, and to repay the guys, that's the key point.
All right, well, congratulations, Paul. Fantastic job you did there. Back to you.
Yes, it was a fantastic job that he did. And as he says, he's reclaimed some of those points that he lost out on yesterday. So Paul di Resta, P1. And here's the Drivers' Championship now. Gary Paffett on 177 points, so he still has that comfortable lead. Paul di Resta is inching closer, 148 points. Then two drivers on 110. They are Marco Wittmann and Lucas Ahr, with Edo Mortara and Timo Glock P5 and P6 in the drivers' points. Still another 8 races to come. An awful lot of points are still up for grabs, so it's nothing like over, that's for sure. So from Brands Hatch, of course, we're heading off to the Adriatico coast, and it is going to be the Misano circuit under the floodlights for DTM, where we will be racing next. A whole different set of circumstances for DTM that we will find down there on the Rimini coast. So very much looking forward to that. So di Resta, Paffett, Rast, the 1, 2, 3. As we get super slow-mos of those cars, it's René Rast, P3. Taking the P2 position for Mercedes-Benz, though, in the all-blue car number 2, it is Gary Paffett. And also in a Mercedes AMG C63 DTM, taking his second win of the season, and he does it on home soil here at Brands Hatch. The winner is Paul di Resta. So the drivers heading up towards the podium area right now. And they'll be brought out onto the podium for the trophy presentations. And just looking at the data and all the information on the screen. Gary making sure that he looks at his best, looks as goes out onto the podium. René Rast there to the very left-hand side of your picture. Paul di Resta in the middle and Gary Paffett to the right-hand side. And Ollie Sittler bringing the drivers out onto the podium. And here comes Paul di Resta on the top step of the podium. P2, Gary Paffett, so British P1 and P2, just reversed from the starting lineup. And then René Rast takes P3. Mercedes-Benz HWA, of course, going to be represented up there on the podium as well. And it will be time for the most appropriate national anthem to be played out at Brands Hatch.
Congratulations!
So the national anthem plays out. Time for the trophies to be presented now to the P1, P2 and P3 drivers up there on the podium. And John McGuinness, the 23-time Isle TT winner, presents the trophy to Paul di Resta. What a fantastic guy John McGuinness is, king of the mountain. A lovely guy to talk to, and he makes the trophy presentation to Paul di Resta. And is going to do the same for the British driver Gary Paffett then, who takes P2. Of course, it's the teams, not Gary Paffett, but beg your pardon.
He just fell over.
Well, well, it happens. Here is Carl Wendlinger, of course, former Formula One and DTM driver, making the trophy presentation to Gary Paffett. And René Rast eagerly anticipates the P3 trophy, which is about to be delivered to him. And sure enough, it is Katie Traxton, winner of the DTM fan experience, that makes the trophy presentation to René Rast then. P3 for him. So the drivers all get together, along with the team's representative up there for the photographs. And then it will be time for the champagne to be liberally sprayed on the podium. And who will win the bubbly... What? I think it might have been the engineer, you know. I'm not sure. But nonetheless, everyone gets a jolly good soaking up there on the podium, and that's great to see. Celebrations all round. Well done once again. Paul di Resta, race winner. Gary Paffett, P2. And René Rast, P3. And at any moment, Hairy Mary with the mop will appear to clear up the mess that the drivers have made up there on the podium. But well done to, well done to Paul di Resta, Gary Paffett and René Rast, who are past towels and chamois leathers with which to do the windows of the race control building that they've power washed with champagne. Great stuff. So, on its return to Brands Hatch then, in the second race, we got the All-British for P1 and P2 today, as René Rast now attempts a bottle drop from the podium. Please, please, please.
One day it's going to miss, isn't it?
No, it went well. It went well. Here we have some of the emotions then of... the podium shots then as Paul di Resta lifts the trophy up high. He's chasing Gary Paffett now in the Drivers' Championship points, and the emotive shots of the champagne being sprayed. René Rast, he took P3. What a good job he did today. He's with Verena.
Well, this man certainly did a great job, René Rast, all the way from P4 to P3, but it was tough. And you did mention in the beginning, either you're going to have an aggressive strategy or not, but it seemed to have worked, so you got to be happy with the podium.
Yeah, not only with the podium, you know, good point for the championship as well, and good pace. I think that's the most important. We looked strong today. We could keep up with the Mercedes, with Gary and Paul. So that's promising for the next upcoming races. So all in all, good weekend for us. Yesterday, good points. Today, another podium. So very, very happy.
You were quietly picking up the speed and getting closer to Gary, but how frustrating was it in the end that it just wasn't enough, but you were trying so hard?
I was still very happy with the pace we had. Obviously, you know, a few more laps more. I knew he was short on DRS because he used it before. So I think he had 1 or 2 more laps of DRS, and then I would have had a chance. But anyway, it's anyway hard to pass here, so still very happy.
You did a very good job. Thank you very much, René. Back to you.
Thanks very much. Yes, very fair points made by René there. What he had was the hope that Gary Paffett would run out of DRS usages. In the end, he didn't, and actually he says it would be jolly difficult to do it in any event, but what it has done is banked some important championship points for René Rast, second day in which he has done that. As we look at the aftermath, if you like, of the podium, from our high shot as we look down to the paddock, there indeed is the podium as we zoom in on that now, and René Rast, you can just see his back up there on the podium, making his way off the podium now, and of course everyone assembled below the podium for the celebrations make their way away, and well, the rain, in the end, Brian, didn't affect the race in perhaps the way that we thought it would, because it didn't appear.
Yeah, I can still see drops of rain on the window at the moment, but there was never enough to make any difference to the race. It has, however, been a great return to Brands Hatch, hasn't it? Or in fact, to the UK for DTM. A good crowd here have come to see it. They haven't got soaked. They enjoyed the sunshine yesterday. They've enjoyed muggy, overcast conditions today, and good racing all around.
Yes, absolutely. It has been a good return for the DTM into Brands Hatch, and as we heard Gerhard say right at the beginning of the programme, Gerhard Berger, it's probably not the last time. And Gary Paffett then, he did his best. It was P2 in the end. He's with Verena.
Gary, you were trying so hard. I mean, you were just really trying to get P1 back, trying very, very hard. But P2 now, are you still happy with it? I mean, after all, you're still leading the championship by 29 points ahead of Paul.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you know, we knew this was going to be a tough weekend, and it was. But the team did an amazing job with the car all weekend. You know, pole position today and second place. You know, I leave here with a bigger lead in the championship than I arrived. So job done, really. You know, I mean, the race itself, you know, I lost the lead at the start. I didn't make a great start. Maybe Danny showed yesterday, P1 on the grid is a bit of a, I don't know, a voodoo or something. There's something wrong with it. But yeah, I mean, after that, I felt like I was slightly quicker than Paul, but obviously I was within a second of him the whole race. Obviously, doesn't do the tyres much good when you sit that close. But, you know, he drove a good race. He didn't make any mistakes. So congrats to him. And I'm still very happy.
And being back here in Brands Hatch in Great Britain after 4 years of abstinence now, what does it mean to you? And also, I mean, this circuit, the GP circuit, how is that?
It's fantastic. I mean, it's great to be back at Brands Hatch, but especially on this track. You know, it's an incredibly tough, incredibly fast circuit out the back, really challenging for the drivers and really enjoyable to drive. So I really hope that the DTM keeps coming here, because it's a real... It will become a highlight of the year, I think. It really is one of them circuits that's so enjoyable to drive. If you get a qualifying lap spot on like I did today, it's so much fun.
But of course, another highlight is coming up in 2 weeks, the night racing in Misano. So we'll see you there, Gary. Yeah. And thank you so much for watching. So in 2 weeks, we're back in Misano in Italy. Looking forward to that. And now here are the highlights of today. So thank you very much, and bye-bye.